Welcome to Sleepy Scholar, where time slows down and history becomes a lullaby. Come sit beside me, here by the crackling fire. The light is low, the world is quiet, and the past is waiting to whisper its stories. Rest your head, get cozy, and let's drift back to Renaissance Italy, where a curious mind named Leonardo da Vinci painted, invented, and dreamed, seeing the world not just as it was, but as it could be. In the soft hills of Tuscany, where olive groves dapple the land and the air hums quietly with cicadas, the small village of Vinci rests. It is here, in the spring of 1452, that a boy was born to a peasant woman and a notary, a child not bound by the rules of noble birth or station. His name would one day echo through centuries, Leonardo da Vinci. But in the beginning, he was simply Leonardo, a boy who wandered through fields, watched the wind bend the grass, and traced a flight of birds with his eyes. He grew up outside the expectations of formal education or courtly manners. There was no university waiting for him, no titles or great inheritance, only the quiet freedom of the countryside and a mind gently opening to the world. The hills around Vinci were his first classroom. He watched the way water flowed over stones, the spiral of shells, and the shifting of clouds. These early observations would one day blossom into grand ideas, but for now, they were the quiet musings of a curious child. He would sketch in the dirt with sticks, build small devices with twine and reeds, and ask endless questions no one could fully answer. Leonardo lived with his father, Ser Piero, a man of some standing in the town. Though Leonardo was born out of wedlock, Ser Piero acknowledged him and brought him into his household. The boy received basic instruction in reading, writing, and arithmetic, but it was clear from the start that his learning would not follow a straight line. He was not interested in memorization or rigid structure. He was drawn to beauty, to detail, to the mysteries of the natural world. He did not speak often of his feelings, but his notebooks later would be full of gentle wonder, not only about the stars and machines, but about the curves of leaves, the quiet dignity of animals, and the play of light on skin. Even as a child, his eyes seemed to notice everything. A world unnoticed by others opened up to him, filled with pattern and possibility. There was a church in Vinci, like many towns of the era, and its small frescoes would capture young Leonardo's attention, not for their theology, but for their artistry. He would sit quietly, tracing the outlines in his mind, wondering how the figures came to life with only pigment and plaster. Art became more than decoration. It was a way of seeing. At home, he sometimes watched his grandfather write, his hand moving slowly across parchment. The tools of ink and quill fascinated him. So too did the maps his father occasionally brought home. Though he didn't yet know it, these maps would plant seeds for his future as a draftsman and designer of wondrous machines and imagined cities. By the time Leonardo reached adolescence, it was clear he would not be content with the quiet rhythms of a provincial life. His father, recognizing the spark in his son, arranged for him to apprentice in Florence, the pulsing heart of Renaissance thought. But that part of the story would come later. For now, he remained in Vinci, a boy perched between the innocence of youth and the awakening of genius. He would wander through olive groves and streams, gently pulling apart flowers to see how they worked, always careful to leave them intact. He built small mills by the riverside, watched the sky change from gray to gold, and listened to the way the world moved, slowly, softly, beautifully. Though no one could have known it then, this boy with his unkempt hair and dirt-stained fingers would one day paint the most enigmatic smile in history. He would dissect human bodies to understand their secret rhythms, dream of flying machines that mirrored the hawks overhead, and draw designs that would not be built for centuries. But in the beginning, he was just a child of Vinci, a quiet observer, a gentle soul. And in those early sun-dappled years, the world began to whisper its secrets to him, not in thunder, but in silence, not in lectures, but in shadows and wings. It was a beginning as soft as a breath, and from it, a mind unlike any other began to unfold. Florence in the mid-15th century was a city alive with color and motion, a gentle hum of voices echoing through marble corridors and sunlit courtyards. The Arno River flowed quietly past stone bridges, its surface catching glimmers of sky and terracotta rooftops. It was here that Leonardo da Vinci arrived, still a young man, carrying the quiet habits of the countryside with him into a place overflowing with learning, wealth, and artistic awakening. His father, Ser Piero, had secured him an apprenticeship with Andrea del Verrocchio, a master sculptor, painter, and engineer. Verrocchio's workshop was not only a place of work, but a school of sorts, where young minds and hands learned to shape beauty from wood, stone, and pigment. Leonardo entered as an apprentice, one among many, but his eye and hand would soon set him apart. The workshop itself was a sanctuary of craft. Tools hung neatly from the walls. Pigments were ground into fine powder and mixed with egg yolk for tempera. Panels of wood were carefully prepared for painting. Clay figures turned slowly on wheels under the practiced hands of sculptors. It was a place of quiet effort, where precision and patience were more valuable than speed. Leonardo learned everything: how to prepare surfaces, how to blend shadows, how to mix colors so they mimicked the softness of skin. He copied the works of the masters with care, not for imitation, but for understanding. He watched how drapery folded under the pull of gravity, how light kissed the edge of a cheek, how the eyes held silent emotion. Though he was quiet, his presence was noticed. Verrocchio soon trusted him with greater tasks. When painting a great religious scene, it was Leonardo who was asked to paint one of the angels. His touch was so delicate, so full of life and nuance, that legend says Verrocchio put down his brush forever, realizing the student had surpassed the master. Whether true or not, the story speaks to the reverence Leonardo inspired even in those early days. Outside the workshop, Florence offered endless inspiration. The streets were lined with sculptures and frescoes. Scholars debated philosophy in shaded cloisters. Music floated from open windows. Leonardo walked those streets like a silent student, listening, watching. He studied the works of Brunelleschi and Donatello, gazed at the great dome of the cathedral, and observed the motion of people going about their days, how they leaned, how they gestured, how their expression shifted in quiet conversation. But even in the bustle of the city, Leonardo remained attuned to the subtler rhythms of nature. He sketched birds mid-flight. He studied the shapes of clouds and the veins of leaves. Where others passed by, he lingered. He wrote notes to himself in a mirror-like script, his thoughts flowing as drawings and reflections. He was as much a scientist as an artist. though the word scientist had not yet taken the form we know today. His notebooks from this time are filled with gentle studies, the anatomy of horses, the play of muscles beneath the skin, the structure of the human skull. He did not merely look, he saw, and what he saw, he preserved in lines as soft as whispers. Florence nurtured his talents, but also his questions. He wondered about the movement of water, the nature of light, the workings of machines. He began to design inventions, cranes, gears, bridges, not with the intention of building them all, but to explore what was possible. His mind was like a quiet stream, branching in many directions, each one flowing with curiosity. He also began to develop his sense of portraiture, not just physical likeness, but the soul of a person. In the gentle curve of a lip, the softness of an eye, the quiet turn of the head, Leonardo captured more than appearance. He captured presence. His figures seemed to breathe. Though commissions were few at first, his reputation grew. He painted small works, designed festival decorations, sketched costumes for courtly entertainments. Each task, no matter how modest, received his full attention. He believed that beauty lived in detail, in the twist of a vine, the shimmer of fabric, the stillness of hands. Time passed, and the boy from Vinci became a name whispered with admiration among patrons and peers. Still, he remained restless. Florence had taught him much, but his ambitions were beginning to stretch beyond the city's borders. He dreamed of larger works, grand projects, and new landscapes to observe and understand. And so, in the years to come, he would leave Florence. But the city had shaped him gently, like water shaping stone. It had shown him how art could be sacred, how observation could be devotion, and how the hands and the mind could work in harmony. In Verrocchio's studio, amidst the scent of wood shavings and the gentle scrape of brushes on panel, Leonardo had become not only an artist, but a seeker of form, of truth, and of beauty in all things. Through gentle hills and fertile plains, lined with cypress trees and quiet villages, Leonardo da Vinci, now a man of nearly 30, made the journey in hope and curiosity. The city of Florence had given him roots, but Milan, he believed, might give him wings. At the time, Milan was a city of ambition. Its duke, Ludovico Sforza, often called Ludovico il Moro, had grand visions for art, science, and engineering. He sought men of talent to bring prestige to his court. And Leonardo, always thoughtful in approach, wrote a letter not as an artist seeking painting commissions, but as a military engineer. In his letter, he promised machines of war, bridges of great span, and tools for both offense and defense. It was only at the end that he mentioned his ability to paint. Such was Leonardo's way, to lead with invention, to spark interest through the unexpected. When he arrived in Milan, the city revealed itself slowly. The streets were wider, the architecture more severe, the colors more subdued than in Florence. But there was elegance here, in the cloisters of churches, in the symmetry of towers, in the measured pace of court life. Leonardo moved gently among it all, observing, sketching, listening. Ludovico welcomed him. Over the years, Leonardo would become a fixture at the Sforza court, taking on tasks both artistic and technical. He designed stage sets for festivals, costumes for courtly pageants, and devices for lifting and moving heavy stone. He advised on fortifications, sculpted portraits, and continued to explore his endless questions about motion, light, and form. One of his great ambitions during this time was a monumental equestrian statue, a bronze horse to honor Ludovico's father. It was to be the largest of its kind ever made. Leonardo sketched it in countless forms, studying the anatomy of horses in intricate detail. He built clay models, experimented with casting techniques, and designed molds of great complexity. Though the statue was never completed, war would soon scatter the court's resources. The project reveals much about Leonardo's mind. For him, the process was as important as the result. The thinking, the testing, the learning, these were acts of beauty in themselves. And still, he painted. In Milan, he created some of his most subtle and poetic works. Among them was the portrait of Cecilia Gallerani, known today as the Lady with an Ermine. In her gentle gaze and calm posture, Leonardo captured something quiet yet alive, a presence beyond the canvas. But his most famous work during this time was The Last Supper, painted on the wall of the convent of Santa Maria delle Grazie. Unlike traditional fresco, Leonardo chose to experiment. He painted on dry plaster, hoping to achieve the same layered detail he could manage on canvas. The method would prove unstable. The paint began to deteriorate within his lifetime, but the composition itself was revolutionary. He portrayed the moment after Jesus reveals that one of the disciples will betray him. Around the table, the 12 men respond not with frozen gestures, but with human emotion, surprise, sorrow, confusion. Each figure is distinct, each movement intentional. The table stretches across the scene like a bridge, drawing the viewer into its quiet tension. And yet, for all its grandeur, the painting maintains Leonardo's signature calm. The figures are alive but not loud. The mood is sacred yet grounded. Even in betrayal, there is stillness, a moment caught in breath. Outside the walls of churches and palaces, Leonardo continued his private studies. He sketched anatomy, dissecting animals and, eventually, human cadavers when permitted. He mapped muscles and bones, the chambers of the heart, the flow of blood. His drawings from this period remain among the most precise ever made, not only for their accuracy, but for their tenderness. He also dreamed of flight. Looking to the sky, he observed birds and bats, taking note of wing structure and air currents. He designed gliders and flying machines, some small and delicate, others bold and complex. Though he never built a working model, his notebooks are filled with graceful arcs and careful notes, written in his familiar mirrored hand. In many ways, Leonardo's life in Milan was one of quiet routine. He rose early, worked slowly, and spent hours in study. He was not a man of loud displays or swift production. His projects often stretched over years, some left incomplete, not for lack of skill, but because his mind moved onward, always seeking. The court around him changed with time. Wars loomed, politics shifted. Friends departed. Eventually, Ludovico fell from power, and the court was dissolved. Leonardo found himself once more adrift, his plans unfinished, his horse never cast in bronze, his paintings scattered. But he did not mourn. For Leonardo, each place, each chapter was not an end, but a passage to something new. The fall of Milan marked a quiet turning point in Leonardo's journey. As French forces took control and Ludovico Sforza was captured, Leonardo left the court that had once embraced him. He packed his belongings and departed with little fanfare. Once again, the road opened before him, uncertain but full of possibility. He traveled first to Mantua, then to Venice, where he advised on the city's defense. He proposed reinforcing canals and building new barriers against invasion. Though he stayed only briefly, Venice left a lasting mark. The shimmer of light on water, the gentle drift of boats, and the city's quiet harmony stayed with him. Eventually, he returned to Florence. It had been nearly 20 years since he had lived there. He was older now, better known, but still moved by curiosity more than ambition. Florence, too, had changed. A new generation of artists had emerged, bold, confident, and competitive. Michelangelo and Raphael were rising stars, drawing attention with their dramatic style. Leonardo, ever the observer, remained apart, working slowly and deliberately. During this period, he painted a portrait that would come to define his legacy, the Mona Lisa. She was the wife of a merchant, Lisa del Giocondo, but the painting became much more than a likeness. Her expression is calm and unreadable. Her smile, barely there, seems to change as you look at it. There is no lavish jewelry, no symbols of wealth, only stillness and presence. Perhaps that is what makes her unforgettable. She seems alive in a way no other painting of the time could match. Leonardo worked on the portrait for years, never fully satisfied, always adjusting. He carried it with him wherever he went. To him, it was more than a commission. It was a meditation on identity, emotion, and life. Around this same time, he began a grand mural, the Battle of Anghiari, for the Palazzo Vecchio. It was meant to celebrate a Florentine military victory. Leonardo sketched scenes full of motion, horses rearing, soldiers struggling, faces twisted in effort. The energy was raw and dynamic. But technical problems soon appeared. He experimented with new painting methods that failed to hold on the wall. Frustrated, the project stalled. Like other grand works, it was left incomplete. Over time, the mural faded, and all that remained were sketches and descriptions. Even unfinished, it showed Leonardo's fascination with movement and the structure of the human body. Despite setbacks, he remained deeply engaged with the world. Nature continued to be his greatest teacher. He walked alone, watching birds, sketching the flow of rivers, and studying the patterns of leaves. He didn't draw to decorate, but to understand. His notebooks filled with quiet insights about light, water, anatomy, and machines. He saw the world as a system of patterns. The branching of trees mirrored the flow of blood through veins. The structure of the human body echoed that of architecture. Invention and nature to Leonardo were not separate. They were deeply connected. He shared his knowledge generously with younger artists and apprentices. He wasn't a formal teacher, but a quiet mentor. He urged others to observe closely, to question appearances, and to trust their own eyes. He gave not instructions, but ways of seeing. Later in life, Leonardo moved to Rome under the patronage of Pope Leo V. Surrounded by rising artists, scholars, and engineers, he found himself somewhat isolated. He painted little during this period, but observed much. He studied church architecture, designed water systems, and sketched birds in flight. Others chased glory. Leonardo followed wonder. His notebooks from this time grew more reflective. He wrote not only about science and art, but about time, death, and the nature of the soul. His handwriting, still reversed, filled the pages like a private conversation with himself. He continued to design machines, buildings, and ideal cities, models of balance and order. These were not blueprints for builders, but dreams of how life might better flow. There was always something unfinished, something just beyond reach. And that was the point. For Leonardo, questions mattered more than answers. By now, his hair and beard had gone silver. He walked more slowly but thought just as deeply. He remained a man of silence and sketches, content in contemplation, in 1516, a new invitation arrived. The young King Francis I of France admired Leonardo greatly and offered him a home at court. The offer included comfort, respect, and freedom. Leonardo accepted. He traveled north, crossing the Alps one final time. He arrived in the Loire Valley, where the French king provided him with a residence called Clos Luz, near the royal chateau. There, in quiet gardens and soft light, Leonardo spent his final years. Clos Luz was not grand, but it was peaceful. Nestled in the French countryside, surrounded by gardens and winding paths, it gave Leonardo something he had long desired: space to reflect, no commissions, no deadlines, just time. The French court welcomed him not as a servant, but as a sage. King Francis I admired him deeply and often visited. Their conversations were long and curious, touching on science, architecture, art, and philosophy. The king called him my father, not out of age alone, but reverence. Leonardo brought with him a few of his favorite paintings, including the Mona Lisa. He continued to refine her in small ways, always searching for balance. She remained with him until the end. Though he no longer took on large works, Leonardo did not slow in thought. His notebooks from Clos Luz are full of ideas. He studied the anatomy of birds, planned ideal cities, and sketched devices for lifting water and measuring time. The drawings remained precise, the handwriting reversed but steady. He designed theatrical sets for royal festivals, mechanical devices that mimicked thunder or caused stars to appear overhead. Even in play, he saw an opportunity to merge beauty with function. Nature remained his closest companion. He walked daily, observing insects, plants, and the changing light. He once wrote that nature is the true guide of the eye. He believed that every petal, every cloud, every ripple in a pond was worthy of attention. His fascination with the human body continued. Though age had made dissection more difficult, he revisited his old anatomical sketches. He marveled at the structure of muscles, the chambers of the heart, the subtle balance of tendon and bone. To Leonardo, the body was not just flesh, it was design, rhythm, and divine logic. He also revisited earlier inventions. Some he refined, others he abandoned. He knew that many of his machines could not be built in his lifetime, but that did not matter. He once said, "A day well spent gives joy in sleep." His joy came not from finishing things, but from chasing them. He remained modest, even as admiration grew. Visitors from across Europe came to see the old master. Some hoped for lessons. Others wanted only to glimpse the man who had painted so mysteriously, who had sketched flying machines centuries ahead of their time. Leonardo welcomed them with grace, though he often preferred quiet. He never married, never had children, but he was not alone. His loyal apprentices and companions stayed with him, especially Francesco Melzi, who had become like a son. As his health declined, Leonardo remained lucid. His thoughts were clear, even as his body weakened. In his final writings, he reflected on time, regret, and the soul. He confessed that he had not done enough, that he had left too much unfinished. Perhaps it was true. Many of his works had been lost, abandoned, or left incomplete. But he had also reshaped how people saw the world, not with thunder, but with quiet wonder. In 1519, sensing the end, Leonardo arranged his affairs. He left most of his belongings to Melzi, including his manuscripts and drawings. He wanted them cared for, not displayed, but studied. On May 2nd, 1519, Leonardo da Vinci died at Clos Luz. He was 67. The king mourned him. Artists mourned him. The world, in some quiet way, felt dimmer. He was buried in the chapel of Saint Florentin in Amboise. The chapel was later destroyed and his remains were moved. Even in death, he remained elusive, hard to pin down, impossible to forget. His legacy was not in grand monuments, but in pages. Thousands of sketches and notes survived him, drawings of muscles, of water, of clouds and gears, pages full of questions, pages full of wonder. He taught that art and science were not rivals, but partners. That curiosity was a kind of faith. That beauty lay not only in the finished masterpiece, but in the draft, the study, the attempt. His notebooks would go on to inspire engineers, doctors, architects, and dreamers for centuries. He saw the future not as something to predict, but to imagine. He once wrote, "As a well-spent day brings happy sleep, so a life well spent brings happy death." Leonardo's life was, by any measure, well spent. He lived not to impress, but to understand. He asked questions no one else thought to ask. He looked longer, more carefully, and more kindly at the world than most ever would. And in doing so, he left behind something rare. Not just art, not just invention, but a way of seeing. Far out in the immense stillness of the southeastern Pacific Ocean, nestled within a triangle of sea where few ships pass and the winds whisper with ancient memory, lies a solitary speck of land, Easter Island. Known to its native people as Rapa Nui, this volcanic island is one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth. Here, over 2,000 miles from the nearest continental shore, time seems to slow to the rhythm of the tides, and a hush of the waves becomes a lullaby for the soul. Rapa Nui rises gently from the sea, its outline low and sweeping, shaped by long, dormant volcanic peaks. There are three main cones: Teravaka, the highest point, Maungapui on the western edge, and the great crater of Ranokau to the south. Its steep walls encircling a hidden freshwater lake dotted with floating reed mats. These ancient summits, softened by time and covered in grasses and shrubs, give the island a calm, almost otherworldly character. As the morning sun filters through a thin layer of clouds, its golden light brushes over the island's rolling hills and stone-strewn fields, revealing a land that is both peaceful and mysterious. The air here carries a scent of salt, earth, and distant rain. Birds call softly from the cliffs, and sea breezes sweep through groves of eucalyptus and fruit trees, planted centuries ago by visitors from afar. Unlike the high, jagged peaks of other Polynesian islands, Rapa Nui's landscape is open and wide, allowing the sky to stretch endlessly above it. On some days, the clouds sit low, trailing their silver veils across the hills. On others, the sky clears to a vast blue dome, the kind that invites deep breaths and quiet thoughts. Scattered along the coast are sandy coves and black volcanic outcrops worn smooth by the passage of time. Anakena, the island's most famous beach, greets the ocean with white sand and turquoise shallows. Coconut palms sway gently overhead, and just beyond the tree line stand several majestic stone figures, moai, with their backs to the sea, gazing inland as they have for centuries. Here the quiet mingles with wonder. Each gust of wind seems to carry with it the echoes of stories long told, of voices from an age when gods and ancestors were thought to share the same ground. The island's isolation has always defined it. It is a world unto itself, connected to the vastness of the ocean rather than any nearby land. For the early Polynesians who discovered it, navigating by stars and swells, this tiny island may have appeared like a dream, a place untouched, waiting. Today, Rapa Nui still holds that dreamlike quality. With a population of just a few thousand, most of whom live in the town of Hangaroa, life here moves at a slower pace. The streets are quiet. Roosters crow in the distance. Children play barefoot on grassy hillsides, and as dusk falls, the air cools gently and a hush settles across the land. The rhythms of nature define the passing of the hours. Morning brings the call of seabirds and the rustle of palm fronds. Midday, the island glows with warm light, and the ocean sparkles with infinite reflections. In the evening, shadows lengthen, and the horizon swells with color, soft orange, rose, and then deepening blue. Night arrives without haste. Stars emerge slowly, shy at first, then radiant. And above Rapa Nui, the Milky Way stretches wide and bright, its arc a bridge to the ancestors, a path for quiet thoughts and peaceful dreams. Despite its remoteness, the island pulses with life. Beneath its surface are hidden springs that feed small wetlands and meadows. Horses roam freely here, moving in gentle herds across the landscape, tails flicking, hooves soft on the earth. They are a part of the island's spirit, untamed yet calm, much like the land itself. In the distance, waves break on the reefs in slow rhythmic sets, always returning, always familiar. The silence of Easter Island is not empty. It is full of presence. It invites the listener to lean in, to breathe deeply, and to be still. The quiet here is not the absence of sound, but the presence of harmony. And as you imagine standing on a grassy rise, watching the ocean breathe beneath a pale moon, the worries of the day grow small, like ships drifting toward the horizon. This is a place that asks nothing of you but to listen, to notice, and to rest. And so, our journey begins, not with urgency, but with softness. We have arrived at the edge of the world, not to conquer or solve, but to wander gently, to observe without judgment, and to let the island speak in its own time. The eastern island, Rapa Nui, unfolds like a quiet poem, each line a breeze, each verse a wave. Let the story carry you now through its landscapes and whispers into the heart of a place shaped by ocean, stone, and time. Long before modern maps, before satellites and sonar traced the contours of our oceans, there were the ancient Polynesian navigators, skilled mariners who read the sky, the sea, and the movement of birds. Their knowledge was not written in books, but remembered in chants and passed from one generation to the next. They ventured thousands of kilometers across the open Pacific in double-hulled canoes, guided by stars, clouds, ocean swells, and intuition. Among the most remarkable of their journeys was the one that led to a remote volcanic island, Rapa Nui, known to many today as Easter Island. It is believed that sometime between the 8th and 12th centuries, the first Polynesian settlers arrived in Rapa Nui. These voyagers may have originated from the Marquesas or Mangareva, bringing with them the plants, animals, and tools needed to establish life on a new land. Their canoes were more than vessels. They were homes, workshops, and temples. Aboard were families, chickens, banana stalks, sweet potatoes, and carefully bundled memories of where they came from. When the island first came into view, it must have seemed both welcoming and mysterious. Its hills were green, its cliffs dramatic, its shores lapped gently by waves, yet it was isolated, more than 2,000 kilometers from the nearest inhabited island. Still, the Polynesians were no strangers to remoteness. They saw potential in the land, and they began to settle. The early years were marked by adaptation. Though the island was modest in size and lacked rivers or large animals, it had fresh springs, fertile volcanic soil, and a temperate climate. The settlers planted crops like taro, sugarcane, and bananas. They raised chickens in enclosures made of stone. They fished in the surrounding waters and gathered shellfish along the rocky coastline. Their homes were built low to the ground, shaped like inverted canoes to resist the ever-present wind. Social life developed quickly. The island became organized into clans, each with its own territory and leadership. These clans maintained genealogies that trace their descent from the original settlers, possibly even from a legendary figure known as Hotu Matua, a founding ancestor whose arrival marked the beginning of time on the island. Villages were established along the coasts, with garden plots and stone walls, ceremonial spaces, and places to gather and share stories. Spirituality played a central role in everyday life. The early Rapa Nui people held a deep reverence for their ancestors, believing that the dead maintained a presence among the living. Over time, this belief took form in the creation of the moai, the monolithic stone statues that now define the island's cultural landscape. These statues, representing deified ancestors, were placed upon ceremonial platforms called ahu, their faces turned inland, watching over the villages. While the grand age of moai carving would come later, the foundations were laid early as reverence and remembrance became central to cultural identity. Innovation was essential in this isolated world. The islanders developed techniques suited to the land's limitations. Lithic mulching, spreading stones across gardens to retain moisture and moderate soil temperature, became widespread. Rock enclosures protected plants from the drying winds. The people became experts at managing scarce resources, ensuring survival without external contact. They also learned to navigate the social intricacies of clan relations, resource sharing, and ceremonial responsibilities. As time passed, a unique culture flourished. While it retained core elements of broader Polynesian heritage, including language, tattooing, and oral tradition, it also developed distinct expressions shaped by isolation and adaptation. Rapa Nui's language evolved independently. Its myths and chants, though rooted in Polynesia, took on local color and focus. A writing system, Rongo Rongo, would later emerge, still undeciphered, but bearing witness to intellectual and artistic life. The settlement of Rapa Nui is a story of resilience, ingenuity, and quiet transformation. From the arrival of the first canoes to the spread of gardens and ceremonial spaces, the people formed a deep bond with the land and sea. They listened to the wind. They remembered their ancestors. They found meaning in stone and silence. Though the world beyond the horizon remained unknown to them, the world they created on their island was full of rhythm, memory, and gentle continuity. Across the rolling hills and windswept plains of Rapa Nui stand the silent figures that have stirred human imagination for centuries. Carved from volcanic stone, with solemn faces and elongated features, the moai statues rise from the earth as if in quiet conversation with time itself. These towering sculptures, some standing more than 30 feet tall, are among the most iconic and mysterious creations of the ancient world. Yet behind their silent presence lies a story not of magic or mystery, but of devotion, artistry, and reverence. The age of moai carving began several centuries after the first Polynesian settlers arrived. As Rapa Nui society grew, so too did its need to commemorate and honor the ancestors who had guided and protected the clans. It was believed that when a person of importance passed away, their mana, a spiritual force or power, remained active and could offer protection or prosperity to the living. The Moai were not merely statues, they were vessels of that ancestral mana, standing watch over the land and its people. The quarry of Rano Raraku, a volcanic crater on the southeastern side of the island, became the sacred birthplace of these figures. Here, the soft, tough stone, formed from compacted volcanic ash, allowed skilled carvers to work with precision and care. Within this quarry, hundreds of moai were sculpted, some still half buried in the slopes, frozen in time as if the carvers had stepped away only moments before. Some statues remain incomplete, while others appear to rest along ancient roads, abandoned mid-transport or left standing, as if preparing for a ceremonial journey. The process of creating a moai was both communal and ceremonial. Once carved from the quarry face, the statue was carefully removed and then transported, often over great distances, to an ahu, or ceremonial platform, located near a village or along the coast. These platforms were not randomly chosen. They were constructed with care, facing specific directions, often aligned with celestial events or clan territories. The moai were raised on these platforms with their backs to the ocean, their faces turned inland, watching over the descendants of those they represented. Transporting the moai has long intrigued historians and archaeologists. Early theories suggested that the statues were rolled on logs, but more recent research points to an elegant, culturally consistent method: walking the statues upright, using ropes and rhythmic movements to sway them forward. This method, demonstrated in modern experiments, aligns with oral traditions and speaks to the ingenuity of the islanders, who used balance, cooperation, and deep knowledge of physics to move these giants without modern tools. The features of the moai are consistent and stylized: strong brows, long noses, pronounced chins, and elongated earlobes. Some wore cylindrical red stone topknots known as pukao, carved from a different volcanic stone and symbolizing status, or hair tied up in traditional fashion. Their eyes, originally inlaid with coral and obsidian, gave them a lifelike presence. When installed on an ahu with eyes inserted, the moai were considered activated, imbued with the spiritual presence of the ancestor. The building of moai and ahu was a cooperative effort, often involving entire communities. It required not only physical labor, but also coordination, food preparation, ceremonial rites, and storytelling. Songs and chants accompanied the work, binding the people to the task and to one another. It was a time when art and ritual were not separate, but deeply entwined in the rhythm of daily life. Each clan had its own moai, and the island eventually came to be ringed by these watching figures, each one a spiritual guardian. Their presence was constant and comforting, a visual reminder of lineage, identity, and sacred duty. Though the moai were grand in scale, they were personal in meaning. They connected each family to its roots, each village to its legacy. This flourishing period of moai construction lasted for several centuries. During this time, Rapa Nui was a tapestry of thriving communities, ceremonial practices, and evolving traditions. The moai, steady and composed, bore witness to all of it, to planting and harvest, to birth and passing, to festivals and quiet evenings as the sun dipped below the ocean's edge. And though time would eventually change the course of life on the island, and many of the moai would later fall or be buried, their legacy remains intact. Even now, as they stand in soft light or cast long shadows at dusk, they remind us of the gentle power of remembrance, of the human impulse to carve memory into stone and to lift it skyward in silence and devotion. As centuries passed on Rapa Nui, the landscape continued to shift, not only in its natural rhythms, but also in the ways the islanders organized their world. The era of the moai eventually gave way to new patterns of living, new beliefs, and new forms of leadership. Though the statues remained in place, watching, enduring, the people moved toward different expressions of reverence and community. By the late stages of the moai building period, signs of change had already begun to stir. The population of Rapa Nui had grown, and with it, the demands placed upon the land. Forests that once covered large parts of the island were gradually cleared, used for firewood, agriculture, and possibly even the transportation of statues. The balance between human life and the natural world became more delicate. With fewer trees came changes in soil retention, shifts in food supply, and subtle transformations in how communities interacted with their environment. These changes, however, did not mark collapse. Rather, they signaled adaptation. The people of Rapa Nui adjusted their agricultural practices, creating stone gardens and rock mulching techniques to preserve moisture and nutrients in the earth. They constructed low-walled enclosures to shelter plants from the wind and used stones to protect crops from direct sun and heat. These clever techniques sustained them through the shifting climate and allowed their culture to continue evolving. Alongside these environmental shifts came a cultural transformation. The old systems of chiefly clans began to lose their influence, and a new spiritual movement emerged centered around a powerful deity known as Make-Make. This god, associated with creation and fertility, became the focal point of a remarkable ritual known as the Tangata Manu, or the Birdman Competition, a sacred contest that reshaped the island's spiritual life. Each year, representatives of different clans would gather at the ceremonial village of Orongo, perched high on the rim of the Rhino Cow crater. With its panoramic views of the ocean and carved petroglyphs lining its stone walls, Orongo was a place of immense spiritual importance. From this cliff-top location, participants would prepare for the Birdman ritual, a test of endurance, strength, and divine favor. The goal was to retrieve the first egg laid by the Manutara, or sooty tern, from the small offshore islet of Motu Nui. Competitors, known as Hopu, would climb down the steep cliffs, swim through shark-infested waters, and wait on the rocky outcrop until the birds arrived to nest. Once an egg was collected, the swimmer would return, often at great risk, and present the egg intact to his patron, the man who had chosen him and represented the clan. The winning patron was declared the Birdman and held special status for the year to come. He lived in seclusion, performed sacred duties, and was believed to carry the blessings of Make-Make. This ritual marked a shift from the ancestral veneration symbolized by the moai to a living seasonal ceremony tied to fertility, the sea, and the cycles of nature. The Birdman cult did not replace the older traditions, but rather grew alongside them. The moai still stood, dignified and silent, while a new spiritual layer enriched the island's cultural fabric. This evolution reflected the islanders' resilience, their ability to adapt not only to changing landscapes, but also to shifting spiritual needs and communal structures. By this time, the island's society had become more centralized. The focus on the Birdman ritual helped consolidate power and ritual authority, offering a unifying event that drew communities together. It was not a time of darkness or loss, but of renewal, a rebalancing of priorities in harmony with the natural cycles that governed island life. Art continued to flourish during this era. Rock carvings depicting birds, deities, and ceremonial symbols covered stone surfaces across the island. Tools and ornaments made from obsidian and bone reflected careful craftsmanship. Songs, chants, and oral histories remained vital, passed from generation to generation, preserving knowledge and memory in the absence of written language. Even as the environment transformed and new beliefs took hold, the heart of Rapa Nui remained deeply connected to land, sea, and sky. The people still fished in the coastal waters, still planted in the stone gardens, still looked to the stars for guidance. Their ceremonies were attuned to the rhythms of nature, the turning of the seasons, the nesting of birds, the arrival of the rains. And through it all, the landscape remembered. The cliffs of Orongo still echoed with wind. The crater lakes shimmered beneath the sun. The Moai, ever watchful, stood in quiet witness to the unfolding story of a people who, time and again, found ways to live with care, with reverence, and with enduring creativity upon their isolated but sacred home. As the sun rises slowly over the curved horizon of Rapa Nui, it casts golden light upon the stone faces that have watched the centuries pass. The island remains a place of quiet wonder, shaped not only by its volcanic landscape and windswept plains, but also by the people who have called it home for over 1,000 years. In this final part of our journey, we reflect on the enduring legacy of the island, its rediscovery by the outside world, and the gentle way in which the past still breathes through the present. The name Easter Island came much later in the island story, bestowed by a Dutch explorer, Jacob Roggeveen, who arrived on its shores on Easter Sunday in 1722. By then, the towering Moai had already stood for generations, their significance evolving in the memories and myths of the island's inhabitants. Roggeveen and his crew were the first Europeans to encounter Rapa Nui, and their accounts brought the mysterious island to the attention of the wider world. In the centuries that followed, visitors from distant continents came to the island. Missionaries, traders, anthropologists, and eventually tourists. Some came in search of understanding, others in pursuit of curiosity or commerce. These visitors introduced new customs, languages, and technologies, altering the island's rhythms in ways both subtle and profound. In the 19th century, the island experienced a period of deep difficulty as foreign diseases and slave raids disrupted the lives of the Rapa Nui people. The population declined sharply, and traditional practices were challenged. Yet, amid adversity, the people endured. They protected their language, their stories, and their sense of place. They remembered the names of their ancestors, the chants of their ceremonies, and the meanings behind the ancient petroglyphs carved into the cliffs. The 20th century brought new forms of recognition and restoration. Archaeologists from around the world began to study the Moai and the Ahu upon which they stood. With the help of Rapa Nui residents, many fallen statues were re-erected, not just as historical monuments, but as acts of cultural renewal. Each moai restored was a step toward healing, a reaffirmation of connection between land, people, and memory. In 1995, UNESCO declared Rapa Nui National Park a World Heritage Site, acknowledging the cultural and archaeological richness of the island. This designation helped protect the sacred spaces and invited careful stewardship of the landscape. Today, conservation efforts continue, balancing the needs of heritage preservation with the rhythms of everyday island life. Modern Rapa Nui is home to a vibrant community. The people speak both Spanish and Rapa Nui, a Polynesian language that links them to distant cousins across the Pacific. They celebrate their heritage with dance, music, and art. Young students learn the names of the moai, the shapes of the stars, and the legends passed down through generations. The old traditions live on, not in isolation, but as part of a continuing story. Tourists arrive each year, drawn by the enigmatic statues and the gentle beauty of the island. They walk among the moai at Ahu Tongariki, feel the ocean breeze at Anakina Beach, and watch the sun dip behind the horizon from the edge of Ranokau Crater. And though the world may feel vast and hurried beyond the shores of Rapa Nui, the island itself invites a slower rhythm, one of reflection, respect, and quiet wonder. In this modern era, the moai remained, not relics of a forgotten people, but monuments of continuity. They speak, in their silent way, of ancestors remembered, of relationships to land and sky, and of a culture that still breathes beneath the surface of time. The bird-man carvings still adorn the stones at Orongo. The ancient ceremonial roads still wind across the hills, and the volcanic peaks still cradle the island in their timeless embrace. The story of Rapa Nui is not one of disappearance, but of transformation. It is a story of resilience, of adaptation, and of deep cultural intelligence. The people of this island, for all their isolation, develop complex systems of agriculture, governance, and spirituality that reflect a profound understanding of the world around them. As we close our journey across this quiet and distant island, let us carry with us not only the image of the moai, majestic and still, but also the gentler truths they represent: community, memory, respect for the land, and the knowledge that even in the most remote corners of the world, human creativity and care can leave enduring marks, not just in stone, but in spirit. The wind moves softly through the grasses, waves touch the shores, just as they have for centuries, and high above, the stars still shine, guiding, watching, and whispering stories that continue to echo through time.